8:17 in the morning. According to multiple sources, an entire nation seemed to fall into a strange, suffocating silence. South Africa, usually alive with noise, traffic, voices, and movement, suddenly slowed down as if time itself hesitated. Phones began to vibrate all at once, notifications stacking on top of each other, breaking news alerts flashing across screens, the name Jayden Adams appearing again and again, a young midfielder at the peak of his energy, his promise, his future, was said to have suffered a sudden stroke, and within moments, reports claimed he did not survive. Confusion spread first, then disbelief, then something heavier, something harder to name. And just as the shock was beginning to sink in, another wave hit, one that many did not expect. Didier Drogba, a figure who had long stood as a symbol of strength, resilience, and African football pride, broke his silence. His voice, according to those who heard it, trembling in a way rarely seen. A short message, just a few words, but carried a weight that felt unbearable. According to several accounts, it was not the polished tone of a public statement. It sounded personal, raw, almost like a man trying to hold himself together while speaking about something he could not fully accept. And from that moment, the story was no longer just about a player. It became about loss, shared across borders, shared across generations. Inside the locker room, it is said the atmosphere turned cold, teammates staring at the same message on their phones, some refusing to believe it, others already breaking down in silence. One player reportedly sat alone, replaying old training clips, as if searching for proof that this was not real, outside the stadium. Fans began gathering, not in loud crowds, but in quiet clusters, holding scarves, jerseys, phones with his picture still glowing on the screen. Many of them not speaking, just standing there, as if words would somehow make it more real. And across the country, people who had never followed football closely still felt something shift, because according to what many described, this was not just about sport. It was about a young life, interrupted without warning, about the fragile line between routine and tragedy, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Drogba's voice continued to echo, replayed on television, shared across social media, each time carrying that same fragile tone, as if every repetition made the reality heavier. Some said it sounded like grief, others said it sounded like disbelief, and a few whispered that it carried something deeper, a sense of helplessness, the kind that comes when even legends, even icons, cannot change what has already happened. As the hours passed, more details were said to emerge, fragments of a timeline, a training session, a moment where something felt off, a brief pause that no one thought twice about, until later, when every second began to be questioned, every decision replayed. According to certain sources, there were attempts, efforts made quickly, urgently, but none of it was enough. And that realization, that something so sudden could take everything away, began to settle in like a shadow, heavy, inescapable. By midday, the story had reached far beyond South Africa, messages pouring in from across the world, players, coaches, fans, all trying to process the same thing. Yet each message, no matter how carefully written, seemed to circle around the same emptiness. Because there are moments when language fails, when even the most experienced voices cannot fully explain what is being felt. And as the day slowly moved forward, the pace of everything else felt wrong. Too fast for something that demanded stillness, too loud for something that felt so quiet. And somewhere, in a room that, according to some accounts, had not been touched since the news broke. A jersey remained folded, a pair of boots placed neatly beside a bench, a phone left face down, as if waiting for a notification that would never come. And in another place, perhaps far from the cameras, Drogba sat in silence again, the words already spoken, yet the weight of them still lingering. Because sometimes, breaking the silence does not end it. It only makes the quiet that follows feel even deeper. And as evening approached, the light outside began to fade, casting long shadows across empty training grounds, across streets where people had earlier stopped to listen, across faces that still carried the same question, how something so sudden could leave behind a silence this loud. And in that fading light, one image remained, a screen still glowing faintly in the dark, the name Jayden Adams still visible, untouched, as if time had chosen that exact moment and refused to move forward. The rhythm begins to tighten, faster, more urgent, pulling everything back just a few hours earlier. According to internal sources from the team, Jayden Adams was still moving through the day like any other, arriving at the training ground with the same quiet focus, exchanging nods, brief smiles, nothing dramatic, nothing that would make anyone stop and look twice. Inside the locker room, the atmosphere was said to be light, familiar, the kind of routine that builds before a match. Boots lined up, jerseys hanging in place, music playing softly in the background. And Jayden, according to those who were there, was part of it all, laughing at a joke, leaning back against the bench, even teasing a teammate about a missed pass from the previous session. Small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that no one ever thinks to remember, until later, when they become the only things left. But then, there was that detail, subtle, almost invisible in the moment. He was said to have mentioned feeling slightly tired. Just a passing comment, something easy to dismiss, something athletes say all the time, no urgency, no alarm. And according to what many later recalled, he brushed it off himself, waved it away with a quick gesture, as if it meant nothing, as if the day would continue exactly as planned. And so it did. The match preparations moved forward. The stadium began to fill, the low murmur of the crowd growing into a steady roar, lights flooding the pitch in bright white, cameras adjusting, commentators preparing their opening lines, everything falling into place, exactly as it should. And somewhere in that rising energy, Jayden stepped onto the field, focused, composed, carrying the same presence that had defined his recent performances. According to several accounts, the first minutes passed without anything unusual. Passes exchanged, movements sharp, the rhythm of the game building naturally. Nothing to suggest that anything was wrong, nothing to interrupt the illusion of control. But then, that moment, the one that would later be replayed again and again, from every possible angle, slowed down, analyzed, questioned. He hesitated, just slightly, a fraction of a second, where his movement no longer matched the flow of the game. At first, it was almost unnoticeable. A small delay, a step that didn't land quite right. And then, according to those closest to the action, his pace began to slow, his body no longer responding with the same precision. His eyes, it is said, seemed to lose focus, not dramatically, not in a way that immediately signaled danger, but enough to create a strange, uneasy feeling, something that did not belong in that moment. Teammates began to glance toward him, unsure, the crowd still roaring, unaware, the commentators continuing their narration, until suddenly, everything broke. Jayden staggered, One step, then another, as if trying to regain balance, and then he collapsed. Right there on the pitch, under the blinding lights, in front of thousands. And for a brief second, a silence cut through the noise. Not complete. Not yet. But enough to fracture the illusion. Because while it may have lasted only a few seconds in reality, for those who witnessed it, it stretched, distorted. Each movement becoming heavier, slower, harder to process. A teammate rushing toward him, another raising his hands, signaling for help, the referee blowing the whistle, the crowd beginning to react, confusion spreading like a wave, some standing, others frozen in their seats. And according to multiple sources, those closest could already feel that something was deeply wrong. Not just an injury, not something that could be shaken off. The medical team sprinting onto the field, urgency replacing routine, voices overlapping, instructions shouted, gestures quick, precise, desperate. And yet, even in that chaos, there was a sense, difficult to explain, that time was moving in two directions at once, too fast for anyone to stop it, too slow for anyone to escape it. And later, when people tried to remember that exact sequence, many said the same thing, that there had been no clear warning, no dramatic sign, just that one small detail, that quiet mention of fatigue, lost in the noise of everything else, and now impossible to ignore, as the moment continued to echo. Long after the stadium lights had dimmed, long after the crowd had left, leaving behind only the memory of a few seconds that somehow felt like forever. The sound of the ambulance cuts through everything, sharp, urgent, echoing far beyond the stadium walls, its siren rising and falling like a warning no one can ignore. On the pitch, teammates stand frozen, some staring without blinking, others turning away, unable to watch what is unfolding in front of them. According to multiple sources, a few players reportedly covered their faces, pacing in short, restless steps, as if movement alone could change the outcome. But nothing changes. The stretcher moves quickly, hands steady but tense, voices overlapping in controlled urgency, and then Jayden is lifted, carried away under the harsh lights, disappearing into the tunnel while thousands remain behind, suspended in confusion. Outside, the noise does not return. It shifts, breaks apart. Fragments of questions spreading through the crowd, people checking their phones again and again, refreshing, scrolling, searching for something that makes sense. But nothing does. And inside the ambulance, according to what is believed, every second becomes critical. Machines already in use, instructions short, precise, the kind that leave no space for hesitation, while the siren continues to cut through traffic, forcing the world to move aside, as if even the city understands that something irreversible may already be happening. Back at the stadium, the energy collapses completely. The excitement that filled the air only minutes ago, replaced by a heavy, suffocating stillness. Some fans begin to leave their seats slowly, not because the match is over, but because something else has taken its place, something far more difficult to face. And beyond the gates, the first whispers begin, not confirmed, not official, but spreading anyway. According to several accounts, messages start to circulate, fragments of information, incomplete, uncertain, yet powerful enough to tighten every chest that reads them. Serious condition, unresponsive, critical, words that carry weight without offering clarity, and with each passing minute, the silence between updates grows heavier, until even the smallest notification feels like it might change everything. And then, the hospital. Bright, cold, distant from the chaos outside. A space where time is measured differently. not in minutes, but in breaths, in signals, in the steady rhythm of machines that refuse to stop. Inside the emergency room, it is said the atmosphere shifts immediately, focused, intense, every movement calculated, every second accounted for. Doctors moving quickly, voices low but urgent, hands working with precision built from experience, yet beneath that control, according to what many later described, there is something else, something harder to contain, a quiet awareness of how fragile the situation truly is. And as the attempts continue, seconds stretch, then collapse, then stretch again, losing all sense of normal flow. Outside the room, figures wait, some standing, some sitting, none speaking much. Because there are moments when words feel out of place, when even asking a question feels like breaking something that is already close to falling apart. And then, inside, the sounds begin to change, at first barely noticeable. A shift in rhythm, a hesitation. The machines that once spoke in steady patterns starting to lose their certainty. According to multiple sources, the room grows even more focused, more intense, as if every person present is trying to hold on to something slipping away. Instructions become sharper, movements faster, the air itself feeling tighter, until suddenly, that steady sound, the one everyone relies on, falters, pauses, and then, without warning, falls into a silence that feels unnatural, heavy, almost impossible to accept. The bright white lights remain unchanged, the equipment still in place, the room exactly as it was seconds before. And yet everything inside it is different, because sometimes the loudest moment is not the sound of chaos, but the instant when everything stops, and no one is ready for what that silence truly means. The world waits, not loudly, but in a kind of suspended silence, screens still glowing, timelines still refreshing, everyone searching for something official, something final. And then, Didier Drogba appears, not on a pitch, not in a stadium filled with chants, but in a short recorded message, simple, unpolished. According to many who watched it, there was no attempt to control the emotion, no distance, no performance. He speaks slowly, each word carrying a weight that seems almost too heavy to release, pauses stretching longer than expected, as if even he is choosing carefully what can be said and what cannot. His voice, it is said, trembles at moments, not dramatically, but enough to reveal something real beneath the surface, something human. He does not begin with statistics or achievements. He begins with silence, a breath, a look that lingers just a little too long, and then Jayden's name, spoken in a way that feels less like an announcement and more like a memory already slipping into the past. According to several interpretations, Drogba does not only talk about talent, though he acknowledges it, briefly, respectfully. Instead, he shifts to something larger, something that reaches beyond a single player. He speaks about a generation, a wave of young African footballers rising with hope, carrying expectations not just for themselves, but for entire communities, entire countries, a future that many believed was just beginning to unfold. And now, according to the tone of his words, that future feels interrupted, not ended, but fractured, incomplete. He mentions dreams, not in a celebratory way, but in a reflective one, as if looking at something that was once within reach, and is now suddenly distant, unreachable. And as he continues, the message becomes heavier, deeper, no longer just about Jayden, but about what his loss represents. Because according to many listening, There is an unspoken question beneath every sentence. How can something so full of promise disappear so quickly? How can a story that seemed to be rising be cut off without warning? Some viewers later said that in that moment, Drogba was not speaking as a legend, but as someone carrying the same confusion, the same disbelief, the same quiet anger that so many others felt. And then there is that shift. Subtle, but undeniable, where the words begin to touch something darker, not just loss, but something closer to betrayal, a feeling that fate itself has broken an unspoken agreement, that if you work hard, if you rise, if you reach the highest level, you are given time. Time to continue, time to grow, time to finish what you started. And yet, according to what many felt while watching, that expectation had been shattered, replaced by a reality that offers no explanation, no fairness, just absence. And in that absence, Drogba's voice lowers even more, almost as if speaking to himself, or to those who understand without needing everything to be said out loud. He does not raise his tone, does not attempt to inspire, does not search for dramatic closure, because there is none. Instead, he allows the silence between his words to grow, to carry meaning on its own. And that silence, according to countless reactions, becomes the most powerful part of the message, because it mirrors exactly what so many are feeling, a space where something should be, but is no longer there. And as the clip ends, there is no clear conclusion, no final sentence that ties everything together. Just a brief pause, a look that lingers once, more. And then the screen fades, leaving behind not answers, but a deeper sense of everything that has been lost. And across different parts of the world, people replay it again, not to understand, but to feel, to confirm that what they are experiencing is shared, that the weight in their chest is not theirs alone. And somewhere, in that quiet repetition, the words begin to echo less, while the silence surrounding them grows louder, stretching far beyond the screen, into rooms where no one is speaking, into streets where conversations have slowed, into hearts that are still trying to accept a reality that does not feel real at all. The rhythm begins to slow, almost imperceptibly at first, then more clearly, as if the story itself is stepping away from the noise, from the sirens, from the breaking headlines, and moving into smaller spaces, quieter corners where the weight of everything feels heavier, more personal. The camera, imagined or not, drifts away from the stadium and into a room where time seems to have stopped. According to sources close to the family, Jayden's loved ones are still unable to fully accept what has happened. The words do not settle. The reality does not hold. It slips, again and again, like something the mind refuses to grasp. On a table nearby, a phone lies untouched, its screen lighting up from time to time. Messages arriving, names appearing, words of concern, of hope, of confusion. Many of them never read. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Because opening them would mean acknowledging something that still feels impossible. And in that same space, small details remain exactly as they were. A chair slightly pulled back, a glass half full, objects that carry no meaning on their own, yet now feel like evidence of a moment frozen just before everything changed. Back at the stadium, inside the locker room, the silence is different, heavier, shared among people who were there, who saw the moment unfold not as a headline, but as reality. According to multiple accounts, players sit in scattered positions, some leaning forward with their hands clasped tightly, others staring at the floor, their expressions unreadable. No one speaks, not because there is nothing to say, but because anything said would feel inadequate, out of place. One deep breath breaks the quiet, then another, a quiet exhale that seems to carry more than words ever could. And there, still hanging in its place, Jayden's jersey, untouched, the number visible, the fabric unmoved, as if waiting, as if part of the routine that never had the chance to finish. Someone reportedly glances at it, then looks away quickly, unable to hold the gaze for too long, because sometimes the smallest objects carry the heaviest weight. Outside the stadium, the world begins to respond in its own way, not with noise, but with presence. People arrive slowly, individually at first, then in small groups, bringing with them flowers, scarves, handwritten notes. According to many who witnessed it, there is no organization, no plan, just a shared instinct to come closer, to stand in the same space, to leave something behind. One bouquet becomes 2, then 10, then dozens. Colors blending together, messages overlapping, some written carefully, others hurried, uneven, as if the hands that wrote them were shaking, phrases repeated. We will not forget. Rest. Why? Questions without answers placed beside words that try to offer comfort. And as the hours pass, that small collection grows into something larger, a sea of emotion forming at the edge of the stadium, stretching outward, silent but overwhelming. People stop, look. Some bow their heads, others simply stand still, their faces reflecting the same mixture of disbelief and sorrow. And in that growing stillness, the earlier excitement feels distant, almost unreal, replaced entirely by a sense of absence that no one knows how to fill. Because according to what many describe, this is not just grief. It is the realization of something missing, something that cannot be replaced, a space left behind that does not shrink with time, but instead becomes more defined, more visible, as everything else moves forward without it. And as the light begins to soften once again, shadows stretching across the ground where flowers now rest, a quiet understanding settles over those who remain, that what happened was not just a moment, but a fracture, one that runs through memories, through expectations, through the simple belief that tomorrow would come as it always had. And now, in these smaller, quieter corners, that belief feels different, fragile, as if it could break again at any time. The rhythm fades, almost dissolving into stillness, as if everything that came before has finally run out of momentum. A late afternoon settles over the empty stands, the light no longer harsh, but soft, distant, stretching across rows of seats that now hold no voices. According to those who returned later, the stadium feels unfamiliar, not because it has changed, but because something within it is missing, something that cannot be seen, yet is impossible to ignore. The pitch lies untouched, silent, carrying the memory of movements that will not be repeated. And on one of the seats, a scarf has been left behind, its colors slightly faded under the dimming sun, shifting gently with the wind. Not enough to draw attention, but enough to suggest that someone had been there and left in a hurry, or perhaps without realizing they would not come back for it. Inside the locker room, the quiet feels deeper, heavier, almost enclosed. Jayden's locker remains open, just as it was. The door, slightly angled, as if interrupted mid-motion, inside, His belongings are still there, arranged in the same way, untouched by time. A pair of boots resting side by side, laces loose, waiting, not packed away, not moved, as though there is still an expectation, somewhere, that they will be needed again, that footsteps will return, that the routine will continue. But the room does not respond. It only holds the silence and lets it grow. Outside, the world has not entirely moved on, because, according to what many have noticed, Drogba's voice continues to circulate, replayed in fragments across screens, shared, reshared, each time carrying that same slow, heavy cadence. The pauses between his words stretching just long enough to remind everyone of what is no longer there. Some listen all the way through. Others stop halfway, unable to continue, not because they do not want to hear, but because they already understand. And in those repeated echoes, the message begins to feel less like a statement and more like a memory being preserved, something fragile, held carefully, as if it might disappear if left alone. And back at the stadium, as the light fades further, a shadow forms in a small corner near the edge of the field. Nothing marked, nothing official, just an empty space, untouched, unnoticed by most, yet somehow it remains clear, defined, as if everyone who passes by senses it without needing to see it directly. No one steps into it, no one lingers too close. According to quiet observations, people instinctively move around it, leaving it exactly as it is, as though that space now belongs to something else, something that cannot be named, cannot be filled. And as evening slowly takes over, the last traces of daylight slipping away, the stadium grows darker, quieter, until even the smallest movements seem too loud, the scarf no longer visible, the locker room door finally still, the echoes fading, yet not entirely gone, because somewhere, in the distance, in the memory of those who were there, in the recordings that continue to play, in the silence that follows every attempt to explain, there remains a feeling, unresolved, unfinished, as if the story paused, rather than ended, and is still waiting, in that quiet space, for something, or someone, to return.